I showed up that morning, holding on to the faint hope that my RSVP hadn't been ignored out of spite. Maybe it had just gotten lost in the shuffle. I told myself, it's Thanksgiving. People get busy. They forget. But when I pulled into the lot and saw the balloons, the gold-lettered signs, and the sounds of laughter echoing out of the event hall, that fragile hope began to crack. No one greeted me, no cousin yelling my name across the parking lot, no uncle waving me over with a drink already poured. Just the hum of chatter and clinking glass behind the door. When I stepped inside, the coordinator, clipboard in hand and headset around her neck, gave me that look. The one people give when they don't know what box you fit into. "Name, please?" she asked, too polite. I gave it. She glanced down. Her brow twitched. "Oh, would you mind waiting over there?" She gestured toward a small corner table by the coats. "We're still finalizing a few things." Finalizing what? It was 10:30 in the morning. The room was already full. People hugging, catching up, plates being passed. Nothing about it looked unfinished. I sat down anyway, smoothing my skirt, trying not to feel exposed. No one came. One aunt walked right past me. I opened my mouth, but she turned before I could speak. Another cousin glanced my way and then looked right through me. That kind of silence, it's louder than shouting. I tried brushing it off. Told myself someone would see me soon, remember I was family. But then I saw the photographer. He was adjusting a light, motioning for people to gather near the stage. My siblings, every last one, were being ushered front and center. I stood up, took a breath, stepped toward the group. Then it happened. My father caught the photographer's eye and made a small motion with his hand. A flick, barely perceptible. But it stopped everything. The photographer looked at me, then looked away. No one called my name. I stood there, waiting for someone, anyone, to say something. They didn't. The shutter clicked. The group smiled. I wasn't in it. "Isn't she the one they said not to invite?" A child's voice behind me, whispered, but sharp enough to slice. I turned and walked out. Behind the building, I found myself near the catering van. I leaned against it, clutching my purse like it might shield me. The hum of the generator buzzed against my back. I kept telling myself not to cry. That's when she found me. A young woman, early 20s maybe, wearing a black apron and looking like she was trying to fix something without getting caught. "Oh, sorry, I thought you were one of us. We've been short today, missing someone from setup," she said, brushing her hands off. I shook my head. "No, I'm family." Her expression shifted. Not pity, not quite, but something close to dread. She glanced around, then leaned in, lowering her voice. "I probably shouldn't say this, but I saw your name on the original list." I blinked. She reached into her apron, pulling out a folded piece of paper, guest list, columns, and checkboxes. One name was scratched out in thick black ink, mine. "They said it'd avoid drama," she whispered. "I don't know who decided it. I just overheard someone tell the coordinator. Not a mistake, not a clerical error, a choice." In that moment, something inside me shifted. Not shattered, no, it hardened. My humiliation turned cold and solid. I walked back in, not fast, not to make a scene, just steady. Eyes followed me, but I didn't flinch. Zelda stood near the bar, swirling her wine like it held the answers. I walked up, held out the checklist. "Did you think I wouldn't find out?" She took a sip before even glancing down. Her smirk never broke. "Some people just don't fit into every picture," she said, cool as glass. I looked at my father, standing just a few feet away. He didn't meet my eyes, pretended to check a message on his phone, like I wasn't there. I didn't shout, I didn't cry. I left the list on the table next to her half-full glass, and I walked out. Every step I took felt like peeling off another layer of who I'd been, the one who begged for belonging. That part of me stayed in that room. Outside, I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out my phone. Opened a file I hadn't looked at in months, just in case. After the dinner, people started trickling out. Hugs were given, leftovers packed up, and the usual chorus of "drive safe" followed folks to their cars. Nobody said goodbye to me, but no one told me to leave either. That silence felt louder than if they had screamed. My father didn't even glance my way as he followed Zelda out with a container of pie in one hand and his jacket in the other. I lingered on the porch. Rain had started, soft at first, like a whisper on the roof. I told myself I'd wait until the last car left, maybe out of stubbornness, maybe just to be alone in that house again without their shadows pressing against my skin. The door clicked shut behind me as I walked back inside. The warmth had gone with the bodies that once filled the space. No more laughter, no more wine being poured, no clinking forks, just the low hum of the heater and the sound of rain against glass. Something about the quiet made everything feel foreign. The furniture was new, modern, sharp-cornered, gray tones. The bookshelves had been rearranged. My mother's framed needlepoint was gone. Even the smell of the place had shifted. No more cinnamon or lavender. Now it was all polished wood and something artificial. I moved into the den, like muscle memory guiding me. There it was, the photo wall. Our family's history lined up in frames, birthdays, holidays, weddings. I stepped closer, and my breath caught. The Thanksgiving photo from 3 years ago. I remembered that day. Green velvet dress. I'd brought the wine, made the sweet potatoes because Zelda never got the seasoning right. But I wasn't in the picture. There was space where I should have been. Not just absence, but a calculated cut, arms cropped weird. The person next to where I stood seemed to be leaning too far. Something had been altered. I leaned in. Digital blur. A smudge where my hair should have been. I checked another frame. My brother's graduation. I was there. I'd driven 4 hours for it. Gone. Another photo. Dad's 60th. I'd held the sparkler cake. Gone again. Each frame told the same story. I'd been erased. My knees gave a little, so I sat on the edge of the couch. It didn't creak like the old one. I stared at the photos, not blinking. Anger didn't rise immediately. First came disbelief, then grief. Not the kind with tears, but a hollow, pressing kind that made your heart sit wrong in your chest. Then I remembered the drawer. Back when I was in high school, my father kept his important things in the desk just off the hallway. It used to be filled with bills and tools, maybe a passport. I got up and walked to it without thinking. The drawer stuck a little. I yanked harder. Inside was clutter, old receipts, dead batteries, a broken watch, 2 keychains that didn't match any keys, and beneath all of it, an envelope, torn a little along the top. My handwriting. I pulled it out. The paper had yellowed around the edges. The ink bled through slightly from age. I didn't have to open it. I knew what it was. I'd written it years ago, after one of our worst fights. I'd told him I was tired of trying to earn space in my own family. Told him I was done, but I still hoped he'd see me. He never opened it. It was sealed, unread, forgotten. That did it. That cracked something clean across my chest. Not sobbing, not a scream, just clarity. He'd had the chance. He chose silence. Then headlights flashed through the window. A car pulling in. I ducked low, instinctively. Zelda. I saw her silhouette in the mirror, fumbling with keys, probably left something behind. My time was up. I slipped out the back door, rain hitting my face as I walked into the night. I didn't know where I was heading. I just knew I couldn't stay. I whispered as I walked, more to myself than anything. They erased me. But they forgot. I still remember. Then I heard a car behind me. It slowed. The caterer's assistant rolled her window down. "You need a ride?" I nodded and climbed in. She didn't say much. The silence was kind. After a while she asked, "You okay?" "No," I said. "But I will be." We drove for a bit, rain tapping the roof. My phone buzzed. Nothing important, just a low battery warning. I scrolled anyway. Found the document I hadn't touched in months. Reclaimed. I opened it and started typing. "You may not see me in the pictures, but I was always there." The dining hall glowed like a page torn from a magazine. Gold light strung from the rafters, polished glassware catching reflections of candle flames, long tables covered in dishes too perfect to be made by family hands, the kind of dinner that's more about the performance than the people. I stood near the far end of the room, clutching the folded pages of my speech. I had rewritten it 3 times. It wasn't grand, just honest. I meant to acknowledge the past, open a small window to healing. I took a slow breath and made my way toward the little podium by the fireplace. Seraphine was seated beside my father. Her hand rested lightly on his arm, like she'd always belonged there. The coordinator nodded to me, motioning that I could begin. People quieted. Forks paused mid-air. I cleared my throat. I always believed in family. That's when the mic gave out, a harsh pop, followed by nothing. Then the lights above me flickered. Not all, just the ones centered on me. They dimmed, stuttered, then died. The spotlight shifted, first to Seraphine, then to a decorative arrangement by the wall. Laughter broke the silence, soft, awkward, confused. I waited. The coordinator rushed up, tapping the mic, offering me a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Looks like we've got a little glitch," she whispered. "Hang tight." I knew better. From the corner of my eye, I saw Seraphine's smile tighten, measured, practiced, smug. Gideon stared at me like I was a painting hung crooked on the wall. No one moved to help, no one offered a second mic. I stood there, words bottled up, heat crawling up my neck. The silence stretched just long enough to burn. I stepped down. As I moved past the tables, a man I didn't recognize, a friend of Zelda's maybe, tapped my elbow. He held a tray in one hand and said, "Excuse me, ma'am, but the servers forgot to bring out the rolls to table 4. He said it quiet, like a whisper meant only for me, but just loud enough for others nearby to hear. A few chuckles, averted gazes. I stared at him, dead on. "I'm not a server," I said, steady. "I'm the one who wrote the speech they didn't want you to hear." The man froze, tray hovering in midair. He opened his mouth, then closed it. His cheeks flushed red. Around us, a hush returned, not the respectful kind, but the heavy kind, like shame settling into the linens. I didn't wait for a response. I kept walking, my pace slow but unshaken, making sure they saw my back as I left the room. Out in the hallway, the noise from the dinner faded into a muted hum. I leaned against a marble pillar, the cold cutting through the heat still pulsing in my chest. My mother once told me, "Speak too loud, and you'll break the room." Well, the room was already broken. I stared at the floor, breathing deep, grounding myself. My phone buzzed once, maybe a message, maybe a notification. I didn't check. Instead, I unlocked it, scrolled to the speech file, opened the video camera. No spotlight, no microphone, no forced smiles, just me. I hit record. "You can't silence me with darkness or laughter," I said into the lens. "Not anymore." The garden looked like something from a magazine spread, white tablecloths under old oaks, mimosa glasses catching the weak winter sun, a trio playing soft jazz near the fountain. It should have felt like home, but it felt like a stage set for people pretending. I walked in late, uninvited, but nobody stopped me. Eyes flicked up, then down again. Zelda sat at the head of one table, her smile too smooth, her posture telling everyone she was untouchable. I chose a chair off to the side where the branches threw shadows over the tablecloth. From there, I could watch without being watched. The event coordinator leaned over, asked lightly, "Did you get the last-minute brunch email?" I shook my head. "Didn't see it." Her brow creased before she pasted the smile back on and hurried off. My cousin, the one who always fixed everyone's phones at reunions, walked up quietly and crouched beside me. "Saw something weird about your inbox," he murmured. "Want to check it later?" His eyes flicked toward Zelda and back to me. I nodded. Later. We ended up in the kitchen, away from the jazz and chatter. He opened his laptop on the counter and pulled up my email. There it was. A message sent from my own account, declining all invitations. The words were polite, wishing you peace without me. Even time-stamped perfectly. I'd never written it. My cousin scrolled. "It came through the estate Wi-Fi," he whispered, "but they masked it with a VPN. If I dig, I might trace it." I steadied my hands on the counter, making my voice level. "How deep does this go?" He met my eyes. "Deep enough to make you vanish on paper." I breathed out slowly. "I don't want revenge. I want clarity. But if they keep pushing, I'll burn their lies in daylight." When we returned to the garden, brunch had settled into that lazy lull between second helpings and coffee. I stood, glass in hand, and spoke over the quiet. "I'd like to make a toast." My voice carried across the tables. Not out of joy, but clarity. Heads turned. Children stopped chewing. Zelda's face tightened a fraction. My father blinked but stayed still. I know someone sent an email pretending to be me, I said, calm and clear. If one more falsehood gets shared in this family, I will unseal every secret I've kept to protect us. Silence. Even the jazz trio stopped mid-note. My niece tugged at her mother's sleeve and whispered, "Is Auntie mad?" I turned toward Zelda. Some people mistake silence for weakness, I added. Not today. The family split right there at the table. Some stared at their plates. Others stared at me. A few younger cousins leaned forward, curious. My father stood and walked away without a word, choosing absence over standing by me. Zelda rose slowly, her face flushed. "You've always had a flair for drama," she said, her voice carrying like a blade. I answered without raising mine. Maybe. But drama doesn't leave digital fingerprints. The children's eyes darted between us. The jazz trio started playing again, softer now. Some cousins whispered among themselves, and I could see loyalty shifting like sand underwater. That night, in my room, I uploaded the brunch video to a private server and scheduled it for future release. My finger hovered over the button before pressing it. "They wanted silence," I whispered. "Now they'll have echo." The envelope was waiting on my chair in the library when I came in from the garden. No return address, just my name printed in block letters. I opened it thinking it might be some leftover menu or a stray bill. Instead, sheets of paper slid out, thick with the smell of toner. My words stared back at me. Therapy notes, quotes I'd only spoken in a locked room, highlighted in red pen. I hate that I feel invisible. I still wait for him to choose me. I'm scared that if I stop trying, no one will remember me. The handwriting around the margins was sharp, slanted. Zelda's, unmistakable. Little comments like pattern and self-pity, written next to my sentences. My stomach turned. Someone had taken what I said in confidence and turned it into a weapon. I walked straight to the tech cousin's room, my hands shaking but my voice low. "Check the logs," I said. "Someone was in my drive." He typed fast, eyes darting. "It came from the estate Wi-Fi," he muttered. "Masked with a VPN but sloppy. Timestamp matches last night. Same login signature as before." I stared at the screen, the rage going from a roar to a knife edge. "They don't want truth," I said quietly. "They want control." This was never about reconciliation. It had always been about erasure. Later, walking near the dock, I saw my father with Zelda. They stood close, her hand resting on the railing, his head bowed slightly. She spoke with slow gestures, and he nodded. He even put his hand on her shoulder, an intimacy I hadn't seen in years between them. I stayed far enough not to hear, but close enough to know. That evening, in the hallway outside my old room, he stopped me. "I just want peace this weekend," he said. I held up the papers. "Did you read them?" He didn't deny it. "Maybe you needed someone to finally hold you accountable," he said. That line cut deeper than the theft itself. He chose her. Again. And maybe he always had. I went back into the house and printed my own copies of the stolen notes. On the top page I wrote, in thick black marker, "If this is how you win, you've already lost." I taped the envelope to the fridge in the family kitchen, right between the grocery list and a photo where I'd been erased. Then I found Zelda. She was in the sitting room with 2 aunts, sipping tea like a queen. "You're not just cruel," I said loud enough for everyone. "You're careless, and you're going to find out the difference soon enough." The family lawyer, brought in for the estate business, pulled me aside near the hallway. He whispered, "Legally, you've got a case, but morally, this is war now." "I didn't start it," I said. "But I'm not hiding anymore." I could feel it inside me, the shift. Grief was gone. What was left was a steadiness, a clarity I hadn't had before. My cousin found me later and showed me the final logs. "It's her login timestamp," he said. "If you ever need proof." I looked at my niece, standing nearby, wide-eyed. "Why does everyone lie about Auntie?" she asked her mom. No one answered. Cracks were forming in Zelda's story. People were reaching out quietly, sending me texts, old screenshots, voicemails from years ago. The kind of evidence you can't fake. I started compiling everything, folders, backups, offsite drives, not to threaten, to prepare. You can't heal what you never name, I thought. It's time to name it. Near midnight, I took the original family reunion invitation from my bag, the one that had felt like a lifeline when it arrived. I crossed out "You're invited" and wrote in bold letters, "You're warned." I slipped it under Zelda's door and walked away without knocking. The library smelled like wood polish and old betrayal. Dim light filtered through stained glass, cutting blue and gold ribbons across the desk where my cousin sat, hunched over his laptop. He didn't look up when I entered, just held out the hard drive. "There," he said. "Her initials are watermarked on every doc. Subtle, but I ran it through the metadata tool. She left her trail." I flipped through the files. Therapy notes, again. Pages I never gave anyone permission to see, let alone share. The same handwriting, the same cold red pen strokes. But this time, the digital fingerprint was hers. Zelda. "Did she think I'd let this slide?" I asked, staring at the screen. "She's betting on silence," he said, but I backed it up before she tried scrubbing it. I leaned back, pulse steady despite the pressure building in my chest. Exposure has weight, but it also has power. By the time dinner rolled around, the estate was glowing under chandeliers and over-polished silverware. Zelda sat at the head of the table in a velvet dress, smiling like royalty. Laughter rippled down the table, wine glasses lifted, soufflés unbroken. I walked in late, wearing black from neck to heel. No jewelry, no apologies, just a flash drive in my hand. Zelda stood, that rehearsed warmth on her lips. "We didn't think you'd make it." I handed the USB to the family lawyer. "Play this." He frowned. "Now?" "Now." He nodded and connected the drive to the display monitor. The screen flickered, and then, my voice, my handwriting, my session quotes, juxtaposed with the proof of theft, the watermarks, the logs, side-by-side comparisons of redacted versus original. I turned to the room. "What you're seeing now is mine, not hers." Gasps. Forks paused mid-air. Zelda's eyes narrowed, but she said nothing. Her smile had vanished. I didn't wait for applause or defense. I walked out before the first plate clinked again. Outside, the air was cool. On the veranda, I pulled out my phone, connected to the estate's network. I opened the guest list email, the one that had excluded me. I hit reply all. Then, side by side, I pasted the manipulated version next to the original, highlighted, time-stamped, labeled. Here's what was sent, and here's what was supposed to be sent. Within seconds, I could hear phones buzzing around the house, low murmurs, sharp intakes of breath. Some family members stood, others buried their eyes in napkins. A few stared straight ahead, refusing to move. Zelda, standing behind the curtains inside, read her phone. Her face dropped, her jaw set. She knew. I didn't need them to say it out loud. I needed them to see it. My father sat frozen at the far end of the table. His eyes flicked from Zelda to me and back again. But still, no words, no gesture, nothing. Then Evadne stood, walked across the room, past everyone, reached for my arm, soft and certain. Just one quiet show of solidarity. She didn't say a word, but it was more than most had done in years. The event coordinator came toward me, her voice small. I didn't know about the email. I'm so sorry." "You should have asked," I said. Calm, flat. The lawyer stood, clearing his throat. "Let's all take a moment." Zelda stood slowly, chin high. "You always did love making a scene." I turned to her. "And you always counted on people looking away." She walked out, heels clicking down the hallway, and the cracks in her legacy followed. I left before dessert was served, slipped out the front entrance, heels in hand, walking barefoot across the gravel. The live oak trees arched over the drive like old witnesses. My car waited at the edge of the lawn. As I opened the door, I felt it. That pause. That itch on the back of the neck when someone's watching. I looked in the rearview mirror. Zelda stood at the veranda, arms crossed. Not to stop me. Not to argue. Just watching. I started the engine, rolled forward, no tears, no hesitation. After the chaos of the night before, the estate felt muted, like the air just before a storm breaks. Dinner was over. People were scattered in small rooms, voices low, lights dim. I asked the lawyer to clear my father's office. He sat behind the desk when I walked in, framed by old photos of family trips, his arm around Zelda at the lake, me cropped out at the edge. I closed the door and stayed standing, the evidence folder in my hand. "Why?" I asked. My voice didn't rise, but it cut. "Why did you let her remove me? Why forge my voice?" He didn't look up. "You wouldn't understand." "I understand better than you ever wanted me to," I said. He stood slowly, turned his back to me, hands clasped behind him. "This is bigger than you," he said, and then he walked past me and out the door. No apology, no explanation, just absence. Inside my head, a line formed clear as glass. Every denial is a confession in disguise. I stepped out of the office, through the hall, out onto the veranda where the guests still lingered over wine. Zelda stood near the railing, confident as ever, while conversations dipped and rose like a tide. I asked the family lawyer for the envelope he'd been holding all evening. He nodded and handed it to me. I opened it and raised my voice. "You've heard a lot about me," I said, "but you haven't heard the truth." People turned. Forks clinked against plates. Zelda's smile froze. I handed the document to the lawyer. "Read it," he began. "The last unaltered will of Robert Blackthorne." And the words rolled out like thunder. My name, primary heir, heirlooms and property titles confirmed. No edits, no redactions, no Zelda. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Zelda's face flushed dark. My father, at the edge of the veranda, clenched his jaw but didn't step forward. "This isn't revenge," I said. "It's correction of a lie." I moved through the guests, handing copies to cousins, siblings, Evadne. Some took them in silence. Others whispered thank yous under their breath. "Tonight," I said, "I claim what was mine from the start." Inside the main chamber, I placed a single check on the heavy oak desk, payable to the Blackthorne Family Trust. The memo line read, "This is the last check you'll ever cash from me." I stepped back. The silence deepened until it felt like the walls would crack. "You can't do this," Gideon snapped, rising from his chair, his voice almost breaking. "I already have," I said calmly. The lawyer cleared his throat. "The signature binds all." Zelda sagged into a chair, her hand over her mouth. Evadne crossed to me and put a hand on my shoulder. No words, just a steady presence. A few relatives began stepping away from Zelda's side, whispering, their phones buzzing with forwarded copies of the will. My father's face shifted. Anger, regret, and something else flickered across it, but still no words. I walked out of the room and onto the front lawn, the moon high over the old oak trees. The grass was damp under my shoes. My niece trailed behind me, her small footsteps quiet. She didn't speak, but when I turned, she was looking at me with something new in her eyes, respect, or maybe just understanding. I stopped under the tree where I had once carved my name as a child. The letters were still there, faint but unbroken. I ran my fingers over them. "You took my place," I whispered. "But you never took my name." The house was still, not the kind of stillness that comes from rest, but that quiet that follows a storm after it's thrown everything it had at you. I sat on the porch swing, black coffee in hand, watching dew gather along the railings. Somewhere in the house, someone dropped a fork. It echoed louder than it should have. Zelda crossed the foyer without looking at me. Evadne trailed behind her, softer in step, her glance catching mine for a split second, then gone. My niece came into the room in a hurry, left a folded note on the table, then ran back out like she didn't want to feel the air settle. I didn't chase her. I didn't need to. There was something full about that silence, a kind of peace that only comes when you finally stop fighting for something that doesn't deserve you. I took a slow breath, looked out across the lawn, and let this truth hit me for the first time. You don't get closure from others. You get it from yourself. I didn't hear my father approach, but I knew it was him by the way the porch boards creaked differently under his boots. He didn't sit, just stood by the railing, arms folded, looking out at the trees. "So what now?" he said. "You run the show?" I looked at him, calm. "No, I'm not staying. Not for this." He scoffed, trying to layer his bitterness under something gruff. "I thought this is what you wanted." "It was never about staying," I said. "It was about being seen, and I don't need this place for that anymore." He didn't respond, just kept staring ahead like maybe the trees could explain where we went wrong. We didn't hug like old times. We never had old times like that. But I did step forward, wrap my arms around him in the kind of hug you give someone when you finally decided to let go, not of them, but of what you thought they could be. Inside, I gathered what mattered: the key documents, the will, the confirmation of what I knew all along. I placed them in a fireproof box and handed them to the lawyer. "Give it to Evadne," I said. "She's calm, she listens. That's what this place needs now." I called my niece, pulled her aside. "You're stronger than this house. Don't ever let anyone here tell you otherwise." Zelda came by before I left. She didn't speak right away, just stood in the hallway, arms crossed. I looked at her and said, "Some things are best left unsaid so they don't stay in your ears forever." She blinked, and I left her standing there. I didn't pack much. One suitcase, no photographs, no jewelry, just a few letters and a sweater I liked. As I walked down the front steps, I noticed the townspeople watching from across the road. Some on porches, some standing beside pickup trucks. No one waved, but no one scowled either. It was a kind of nod, the quiet kind, like maybe they'd been watching all along. I walked to the old church. Same one my mother used to bring me to when I was small enough to fall asleep on her lap during sermons. I lit a candle for her. No prayer, just breath. There was a hymnal on the back pew. I flipped it open, took a pen from my bag, and wrote, "Forgiveness doesn't mean staying." The walk to the bus station was long, but it felt lighter than it should have. I sat on a bench beside an older man humming a hymn, tapping his cane. "Running away?" he asked, not unkindly. "Running forward," I answered. The bus pulled up. The driver nodded. I stepped on without looking back. Savannah, with all its heat and secrets, began to blur in the window beside me. I opened my notebook and began to write. Chapter 1. The Woman Who Left the House That Raised Her. The house was still, not the kind of stillness that comes from rest, but that quiet that follows a storm after it's thrown everything it had at you. I sat on the porch swing, black coffee in hand, watching dew gather along the railings. Somewhere in the house, someone dropped a fork. It echoed louder than it should have. Zelda crossed the foyer without looking at me. Evadne trailed behind her, softer in step, her glance catching mine for a split second, then gone. My niece came into the room in a hurry, left a folded note on the table, then ran back out like she didn't want to feel the air settle. I didn't chase her. I didn't need to. There was something full about that silence, a kind of peace that only comes when you finally stop fighting for something that doesn't deserve you. I took a slow breath, looked out across the lawn, and let this truth hit me for the first time. You don't get closure from others. You get it from yourself. I didn't hear my father approach, but I knew it was him by the way the porch boards creaked differently under his boots. He didn't sit, just stood by the railing, arms folded, looking out at the trees. "So, what now?" he said. "You run the show?" I looked at him, calm. "No, I'm not staying. Not for this." He scoffed, trying to layer his bitterness under something gruff. "I thought this is what you wanted." "It was never about staying," I said. "It was about being seen, and I don't need this place for that anymore." He didn't respond, just kept staring ahead like maybe the trees could explain where we went wrong. We didn't hug like old times. We never had old times like that. But I did step forward, wrap my arms around him in the kind of hug you give someone when you've finally decided to let go, not of them, but of what you thought they could be. Inside, I gathered what mattered. The key documents, the will, the confirmation of what I knew all along. I placed them in a fireproof box and handed them to the lawyer. "Give it to Evadne," I said. "She's calm. She listens. That's what this place needs now." I called my niece, pulled her aside. "You're stronger than this house. Don't ever let anyone here tell you otherwise." Zelda came by before I left. She didn't speak right away, just stood in the hallway, arms crossed. I looked at her and said, "Some things are best left unsaid, so they don't stay in your ears forever." She blinked, and I left her standing there. I didn't pack much. One suitcase, no photographs, no jewelry, just a few letters and a sweater I liked. As I walked down the front steps, I noticed the townspeople watching from across the road, some on porches, some standing beside pickup trucks. No one waved, but no one scowled either. It was a kind of nod, the quiet kind, like maybe they'd been watching all along. I walked to the old church. Same one my mother used to bring me to when I was small enough to fall asleep on her lap during sermons. I lit a candle for her. No prayer, just breath. There was a hymnal on the back pew. I flipped it open, took a pen from my bag, and wrote, "Forgiveness doesn't mean staying." The walk to the bus station was long, but it felt lighter than it should have. I sat on a bench beside an older man humming a hymn, tapping his cane. "Running away?" he asked, not unkindly. "Running forward," I answered. The bus pulled up. The driver nodded. I stepped on without looking back. Savannah, with all its heat and secrets, began to blur in the window beside me. I opened my notebook and began to write. Chapter 1. The Woman Who Left the House That Raised Her.